The year is 1977. Mom and Dad hooked up. No, I'm kidding. They didn't have sex. Yeah. So what do you want to know? Like how I got into games and where it all started?
Yeah. What was the programming was a thing.
Sure.
Where'd that come from?
So definitely, definitely not my parents. So my dad was a classics professor, and my mom was an English professor. She did some marketing, but she did do a job for a while when I was a kid. She worked at CompuServe, which it's funny how like there's a couple things I'm finding out that like are making me older, and like one of them is that like I'm meeting people who didn't realize that Sega made hardware, and the other one is that people don't know what CompuServe is. CompuServe was like the number 2 to AOL, but it was sweet. So it was a dial-in service pre-internet. You know, this is early '80s. I was a kid, and my mom, she worked there, and so unlike a lot of kids, just people period, we had access to telephony and like internet, you know, communication and dial-ups that were beyond just BBSs, and even what those were, that was still all super, you know, tech handicraft scene. Anyway, so I had access to CompuServe when I was like, I don't know, 7, 8, starting there, and then unlimited plan, because that was expensive. That was like a 10-cent per minute plan type thing. It was local to Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up, so like no long distance charges. Again, that was a big deal back then. We literally had a 300-baud acoustic coupler, like the one in War Games. That was the bomb. Anyway, that is what got me definitely into games and into programming and stuff like that before games so much. But so I would just log on with my mom's account and check out, like they had chat rooms. You know, that was like their most popular thing. Games was like their second or third most popular thing. So I played a lot of games, and unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see the light of day. They were all custom written for CompuServe. They were all ASCII based, you know, ANSI graphics, and a lot of the staff who worked on that are, you know, other places. I don't know if they even have the source code anymore, but that would be sweet to work on. So yeah, that's what it started for me. And then from there, my mom, she listened to me. She would and also she would, you know, she'd bring home computers all the time. So CompuServe was a test lab for Apple, a lot of the big IBM company, you know, PCs. So IBM obviously was one of them. Toshiba was one. So she came home with a Toshiba T1200 laptop. This thing weighed like 5,900 pounds, but it had a handle on it, but it was sweet. It was a Hercules monochrome monitor. It was ahead of its time. Anyway, I would get to monkey around with that, and that's when I started getting into, I started dialing out to local BBSs and whatnot in Columbus because of Ohio State and CompuServe and Battelle Labs and some other big tech areas, Ross Labs. They had a pretty flourishing tech scene, and so that's what got me into BBSs, and that's from there I learned to, like, you know, make simple mods for BBSs, and then my mom saw that, and so she, one summer, I think when I was in 7th, 8th grade, there was a programming course in BASIC that you could take at one of the high schools in town. So I went there, and yeah, and that's what started it all off pretty much. And then in high school, I got really big into the 2600 scene, you know, the information liberation stuff, and the EFF that was one of the seeds for the, or I guess, I don't know, not seeds, but like that was like Electronic Frontier Foundation, 2600, they have a history together. It's really cool. Anyway, that got me more into tech. And then in high school and then early college, I started getting more into, I wasn't playing games for the whole time, but I really wanted to start making games. Even junior high, I remember, in fact, my mom just called me and she found a letter that our 7th grade teacher told us to write to our 20-year in the future self, and it said, "I really hope you enjoy the video game company that you own, Anthony." You know, that's what I wrote to myself. That was silly, but I don't know if I'd want to own my own game company now, but it's a lot of work. But but that was pretty cool. So anyway, I was in college at Ohio State. I did computer science, and then I was working on games there with my buddies. And back then there wasn't the Ludum Dare, there wasn't like the game jams, not as prevalent. And so it was kind of, you were really hunting to find stuff to do. Gama Sutra and that kind of stuff was just becoming, you know, really popular. And Game Developer Magazine was still what was really big. Obviously, this is mid-late 90s at this point, so, you know, very established scene and whatnot. And then came out west. I applied to Backbone Entertainment, and at the time I think it was Digital Eclipse still, and that was around early 2000s, very early. And then that kind of started my whole true professional gaming career. So you know, the hardest thing in games, I think, is to get into it. Is you have no experience, right? It's what everyone faces when they get out of college. But games is such an attractive industry, especially like with programming and that kind of stuff becoming more popular these days. That like it's even more popular. Everyone wants to get into it, so there's no problem from an employer standpoint, a studio standpoint. Like we got so many people applying to us, we're not worried about it. So getting in is really hard. So what brought me to Backbone was frankly is just they liked my skill set. I had done some embedded systems work before. I talked about everything I could outside of just my computer science curriculum. Like, oh, I've modded PS2s so we can make dev kits out of them, and that's a pain in the butt because you're soldering surface mount chips and blah, blah, blah. Like, I tried to do anything that would just make me stand out and talk about just not just my schoolwork. And Digital Eclipse, eventually Backbone, called me up and they did a phone interview, and then they flew me out and then they offered me the job, and it was awesome. And so like that's how I got my foot in the door. So yeah, like I don't think I ever said like, man, I want to work on a Blues Room game. That was gonna be the bomb. But like it was more just like I get a chance to work with this studio that's been around for a long time, super respected, veteran dudes. I can learn a lot here, and I did. And so that's what got me there.
They were kind of a for-hire, port house, all kinds of different stuff, right?
Yeah, Digital Eclipse was known for a lot of their ports and emulations of classic games on new platforms. So like if you look at their catalog, it's insane. They did a lot of stuff, and yeah, a lot of it was, they had some original games they always wanted to work on. The most popular that got out there was Death Jr., PSP early title. They got 3 games out of that, 2 sequels. And that was like, that's what they always wanted to do, but they did the other stuff, the ports and also to kind of pay the bills. So yeah, so I kind of cut my teeth there, worked on a couple cool games. So that's really like, so Backbone also, they really, more than porting, honestly, specialized in licensed games, And the reason I bring that up is how that informs your skill set is you learn, I think you have this external force that makes you get better at estimating how long something is going to take. More than when you don't have that external force. So what do I mean? So like one game I worked on was Shrek and Roll for Xbox Live. Small kids game, right? It was the Xbox Live smash hit, Shrek and Roll. Let's just caveat that. But anyway, really cool game. There's a fun story behind like what that game was based off of and whatnot. But that game was for Activision. Small game for them, right? Like not even a drop in their bucket. It's Activision, right? But they just wanted something that would launch with, I believe it was the DVD release of Shrek the Third, I think, one of the Shrek movies. And so for me, like it was my first chance to work on the 360 and, learn something new. Well, it was awesome. But that game, that date that it had to ship had to match that DVD release. And that's already figured out. I mean, manufacturing, there's not much, it's not hard to figure out something like when is a DVD going to get manufactured, right? That's a very established process. But games, and I'll say this at any time, like games always require iteration to be good and to be fun, and to get it to that point as early as possible. That goes back to you have to be able to estimate how long you think it'll take to do something, whether you're an engineer, an artist, designer, whatever. So so when you have to work on something that is like that date is not moving, sorry. In a perfect world, right? Like you would always be iterating on a game, and then you would just release awesome versions of it, and the next one would be more awesome than the last. But like that's in a world where like I think Valve does that. I don't know. Like they got the resources and time to do it, But so that's how I learned really was how to like try and really work with my tech directors, my lead engineers to like figure out and estimate as best we can. I was really I had done a lot of cool stuff there. I'd been there for about 4.5 years, I think. I had just come off Shrek and Roll. That was a pretty short but intense project. Again, I was so new to like the 360 and just that whole engine. That was a different engine at Backbone than our other stuff. I was pretty burnt out. Gauntlet before that was still ongoing, but I had been on some serious crunch there too. So I kind of needed some time, some downtime. And I didn't know if I wanted to stay in games at all or not. I think that happens to a lot of people. I read somewhere this could be a totally wrong statistic that like the average career span of someone in games in game development is something like 4 years, 4.5 years. We should find a reference for that or something. I thought it was a Kama Sutra thing. I don't know. But I can see why. When you have a thing that won't move, like a DVD launch date or a movie release date, when that date won't move and you still want iteration time to make games good, because that's what all games need to be good, that iteration time is only found by expanding your workday, right? So you end up crunching. So I did a lot of that, like a lot of guys do in the industry. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back into video game development. But I knew in the meantime, Chris Charla, he had become the head of business development for Foundation 9. Foundation 9 was formed by a couple companies, including Backbone, coming together into a larger set of studios. In fact, they became the largest independent developer in the world. I think they peaked at 7 or 8 studios, 700 people worldwide. Anyway, they therefore needed a dedicated biz dev crew, which is really was just their job was to just go to publishers at the time. Again, this is at a time when it was a much more traditional publisher-developer relationship, and they needed help with building and maintaining relations with publishers, where I could say, hey, Sega, Namco, EA, Activision, we've got these studios and they're working on, here's some original stuff they're doing, and also like, oh, do you need, I see, one of your primary SKUs is coming out, like we can do the DS SKU or we can do a secondary SKU for that, or digital. I'm making sure I'm up to date on all the news feeds, reading the rags, so to speak, where it's like, oh, Ubisoft announced they're doing an Assassin's Creed 2. Like, oh, cool, I bet you we could do, I wonder if they have a DS solution. I wonder if they have a, an XBLA, brother game to that or something like that. I don't know. So it's like, pinging them about that, making sure I'm always aware of what's going on with my publishers and making sure they're always aware that we have availabilities or not. Then on the inward-facing stuff, you talk to all the studio heads and senior people at the studios that you represent, and they say, hey, Anthony, I've got this awesome pitch for a new, I don't know, like Shinobi or a new, Dig Dug, and like this is awesome. Like I think Namco would dig it, I think Sega would dig it, whatever. Because I've had to go outside of just being a programmer, and you're forced to look through their lens. They being the producer, the artist, the studio head, like that person is probably dealing with a lot of stress that you don't have any ideas about, And so oftentimes when you're in your own little world of programming, you see other disciplines as a black box, and kind of rightfully so. Like I don't need to worry about what that artist is doing right now because I'm just going to assume they got it. I need to solve my problems. Yeah, it helped a ton, and of course, it helped me become a better producer just by having a varied background. I'm pretty good at programming still. I know the kind of the outward facing side of things. What are the repercussions of feature sets and that kind of stuff in a more general sense to like people who might have to publish the game and that kind of stuff. Although I've learned you really don't want to tell an engineer like I used to be a programmer, because they're just like that's great. I need you to get out of my face. So yeah, because they're you let them, they know what they got it. They know what they're doing. So and then what was neat about that job is because now I was on the other side of the table. I wasn't the guy saying, hey, guy who might want to sign our game, we've got all this. Now people were coming to me. And one thing I learned really quick was how, I don't know, I knew it already, but it was a really blatant and obvious example of always be respectful to everyone you meet. Because one day that table is going to flip and you're going to be the guy who's asking for money, or you're going to now be the guy who has money. So it's always good, again, open, honest relationships, that kind of thing. Anyway, side note, but it's really important to do that. Yeah, so that was cool. So everything up to now has been on the internal development side, or just development side at Foundation 9. When I again, you make a lot of relationships, you meet a lot of people, and one thing that I met, a couple guys that I met at Sega, they needed an A&R manager. So A&R is a music term. It means artist and repertoire. It just means I'm a guy who would go out and try and find new games to sign for Sega. Sega at the time was really pushing their digital initiatives. And they wanted someone who understood kind of like console digital and Steam, kind of getting crazy, and you know, this new stuff, free to play, was becoming a thing for the mobile space, whatever. So, and Sega's a household name, so like you can imagine they get a ton of submissions for games. So they needed, on one very pragmatic level, like someone just to sift through this stuff. They would partner me with like their creative director or their publishing director, and be like, you know, so yeah. So anyway, I had lunch there, and I interviewed there, and I got the job. It was awesome.
Why leave Sega to come to Double Fine? Like,
Yeah, at Sega, you know, you're in publishing. Publishing is a different animal, you know, altogether than development. It's tough. You know, there's reasons why, you know, publishers exist. There's a lot of muscle that needs to go into getting a game talked about and advertised and blah blah blah. I really liked it. I liked it because I could go talk to so many developers, and I like talking to developers. You know, like it's fun. Like, you know, that's what I know. That's who I am, and that kind of stuff. I felt though that like you know, it wasn't quite. It was too far away from development. You know, I realized I kind of missed this. You know, like again at this time, although I was still working my butt off at Sega and other places, I had time to kind of come down from the crunch that I was going through at Backbone. So I just realized, you know, I really want to be close to the. I want to be back in development. I kind of want to go back into programming, maybe. So yeah, so that's kind of when I went back in development, and got me here at Double Fine. And yeah, the Kickstarter was about to start. The planning for the Massive Chalice Kickstarter was underway, because, you know, again, because of my varied background, I think they, Justin and Issa and Tim saw me as a pretty viable candidate, like to like help, like, hey, you know, we've done one before, and Tim's busy with his own thing, Greg, he did his own thing, so like let's get just an extra set of hands to help Brad do this thing through, and so I managed that, and if they said if the game funded, if the Kickstarter funded, I could keep my job. Luckily, it funded, so that was pretty cool. The producer is typically, you know, kind of the brass tacks person. It's your job, because unfortunately we live in a world where time and money matter for making games. We don't have infinite amounts of it. So, you know, you are the steward as the producer. You are, at the end of the day, you are the voice for the budget and the schedule. And in some sense, it's easy because it's very black and white. It's like, there's no question. Like, if we have this many people on the team for this long, the money will run out here, or the money will run out here if we do this, that, and the other. So therefore, you know, project lead or lead artist or lead engineer, given that the best estimate we've got for these three things, it takes longer than that, you're gonna have to pick one that we're gonna have to low priority and be willing to not get to, if time, you know, if that's what happens. And that, no one wants to hear that, right? And it doesn't mean anyone, you know, no one's crying about it, but it's just like, that's tough. That's tough to hear, because that's just the nature of the beast. And so the producer is typically the person who's delivering that. And again, not in a vacuum. You know, most of the time you're informing the lead about that and being like, here's the state of affairs. You know, here's how we're burning through stuff, or we're, you know, seems like, you know, the guys are, you know, doing well. So again, the lead is always big picture. On larger projects, you'll typically see the producer working with the discipline leads, lead artist, lead designer, lead programmer, and they'll be managing their guys. You'll be helping them manage their guys, but saying like, all right, it seems like everyone's on track and we got some stuff going on, you know, or engineering, and this feature is falling behind, you know, blah, 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 and just keeping the project lead aware of that stuff. You get to cheer when, you know, when things get in and it's awesome. But oftentimes, you know, you also have to just be the pragmatist, the realist, and just say, you know, we're running out. We have to prioritize. It sucks because you're like, if you're like, this is your baby, like you have your family, I guess you have to pick your 5 kids and rank them, which one you like the most. That's tough. But the producer helps the lead, you know, do that. All right, so this is Scrumptious. Scrumptious is a tool that was developed by our very own Gabe Miller, project lead of Costume Quest 2. That is, it's a web-based task tracking system. So for any aspiring producers out there, lol. So for any aspiring producers out there, you'll probably run into stuff. There's more traditional task management stuff. Jira, Handsoft is a big one. Microsoft Project is one that a lot of people use. This is ours. We made our own. I think this was made for Brutal. I really wish Gabe could talk about that, but this is way before my time. But this was made basically just our own kind of way to track tasks. We just custom made something because we wanted just exactly what we needed, and this still serves that purpose really well. To be clear, no project at Double Fine has to use this. Some projects use just Google Docs or Excel Docs for tasks, like old school style. When someone comes into work every day, what they're going to do is they're going to sit down and they're going to sit and they're going to fire up Scrumptious, and it's going to have all their tasks. Imagine like multiple user stories, multiple tasks, user stories, blah blah blah. But what they care about really is you want to look through all that stuff. You want to look at just your tasks. All right, so here it is, bam. In this example, again, I only have one task. So let's say, for example, like I have to transfer these audio files from the recording studio Double Fine. Let's say I'm doing that through FTP. Let's say I wrestled with some craziness on their server for like half the day. Turns out it took me the whole day to do this, or whatever. I thought it was going to take me half a day. But it's took me the whole day. So what I can do is, in the remaining field, I can say, you know what? There are not 4 hours remaining, actually. There are actually 8 hours remaining. And then that updates and says, okay, 8. And it took me 8 hours to do it. Sweet. And the cool thing is, Scrumptious shows, because if you looked at this in a vacuum, you'd be like, oh, wow, Anthony estimated 8 hours, and it took him 8 hours. He's the man. That's awesome. But Scrumptious knows, and it knows that you actually originally estimated 4 hours. So if you click on the task, see it says this baseline estimate. That's what we originally put in there. And here's the one that we found out it was hard to do. It took us the whole day. Why is that important? So again, remember, we're using Agile and Scrumptious to do this stuff ideally kind of early on in development. I mean, you can use this throughout. For example, I think the Cosmic Quest guys, I think they use Scrumptious all the way through development. But we're trying to figure stuff out. I just learned that it takes me about a day to get a file dump from the recording studio. That's really good to know. And you can imagine, that's a trivial example, right? But let's say there's multiple programming tasks that you have, and you thought it took you X amount of time, and then it turns out it really took X plus 4 hours worth of time. It informs you as the person who's trying to do this stuff to hey, you know what? You tend to underestimate tasks in this particular field. So maybe your controller input tasks, you pretty much nail that all the time, and that's probably because you've done controller input stuff here before, as an example. But your AI tasks for the pathfinding for the enemies, you tend to underestimate those by 75%. That's okay. Again, it's not about it's not an I told you so kind of thing. It's just that is a really powerful metric to know, because that's a big thing that producers do. They look at how long people say they're going to take tasks, or how long they think they're going to estimate them, versus how long it actually took them. That is a really powerful thing to use when planning a project. And you want to figure that out as much as you possibly can in pre-production, and that's what Scrumptious allows us. So again, what you're seeing right here, back to this example, you're seeing it track that for you. Great, good to know. That information won't get lost, it won't get forgotten, it's recorded. That'll be really handy to know down the road. Right, so in pre-production, it's all about finding out what you want to do and how long you want to take it. So Scrumptious is great to track that. Again, track these sprints, these short bursts of getting work done. Soon, you start to get an idea of the big picture. Now that means you need to start thinking about the project as a whole, going past pre-production, going into production. So let's start laying this stuff out on a timeline. And traditionally, in fact, Issa taught me this a long time ago. What you do is you just write stuff down on cards. So in our case, a card would be the enemy one, the bomber, functional. Cards are great, but we also have this opportunity to define what it takes to make an enemy functional. We kind of figured that out, for the most part in pre-production. That's what we just talked about. So now that we know that, let's go over here and make a definition for it. We put the estimates over here. So to get an enemy functional, it's going to take 3.5 days of programming, 1 day of design, 1 day of modeling, 1 day of VFX. All right, that's cool. That's good to know. So now over here on the roadmap, we can say, all right, let's talk about this bomber guy. We got to get him functional in February. This is everything we care about in the game. And then the columns over here, again, you put everything on a timeline. Now we're starting to talk time, and that's important. Time and budget, right? That's what producers care about. Let's look at this enemy 1. So now, okay, we have to get the enemy functional in February. Let's make them final in July. It looks kind of silly right now, but because we have other enemies that we need to get functional, right? The Swapper, Time Killer, and Bone Shell. Why are these so spread out? Well, because if you scroll to the bottom of this thing, it takes into account, again, everything we care about in the game, every phase of that in the game across months. What we're trying to do is spread out how long it takes us to do stuff. Again, there's other projects going on at Double Fine. There's multiple projects. We don't know when, when's Chad going to become available? When's Dan going to become available? Those are our programmers, Oh, they'll come. Oh, and you know what? This month we only have two programmers. This month we had 3 programmers. So that tells you your capacities. So now we start, again, remember I told you how Issa, she talked about how you just put cards on a table and you start shuffling stuff around and you kind of look at it oh man, we look pretty blocked up in April, May, June. Let's spread those cards out some more. That's all this is. That's all we're doing. We can take the estimates from this page over here so that when we move these cards around, these guys, we can just do that, boop. Then we can actually have it do all the math for us and just give us an estimate of how long it's going to take for that month. All the work for that month for every single discipline. So I just moved that up there. So let's recalculate those totals. Boop. So you'll see that mark. Okay, you know what? We're still red right here. Red means, why is this red? What does this mean? We have too much programming work to do in February. Why is that? Because right here, this is the available programmers we have for every month, the available designers we have for every month. So what we do is we compare in February programming capacity, how many programmers we have available, to the amount of work that needs to be done. Well, there's about 7 more days worth of work than we actually have of programmers. So that's beyond a threshold that we're not comfortable with. So we set up a formatting rule that just colors it to show us that. Again, we're just trying to you're talking with the project lead here. That guy's got a lot of stuff going on. As a producer, I got a lot going on. More importantly, Matt Hansen, Justin Bailey, Tim Schafer, they got a lot of stuff going on. This might help them at a glance understand what we're trying to accomplish, where the bottlenecks are in our project. So that when I go to Matt Hansen and say, hey, Matt, in February, I really could use 1 more programmer because guess what? We have too much work. And this is all critical stuff. He might say to me all right, cool. You know what? You don't have, 3 halves of a program. Let's say you have, I'll give you a programmer. I'll find that programmer. Let's say you have 3 programmers for that month. All right, sweet, man. That really helps. And then I'll put that in and I'll update it. Oh man, now we're set. This is probably the most powerful tool we use in production, hands down. Again, it's a very much living document. When we feel it's getting out of hand, maybe Chad estimated something really conservatively, he said it was going to take him, 3 days, 8 days. It took him 2 days. Sweet, that's a win. If we can identify it and put the accurate one in there as fast as possible, then it's just going to make the next month more accurate, and the next month more accurate, and the next month more accurate. So it has to be a living document. The next level of detail for that is usually a feature priorities and estimates. This is where things get a little hairy. This is where things get a little more down to the nitty gritty. Boink, yeah, priority. Okay, this is really important. Okay, so the priority, priority 1, this is priority 1, 2, or 3, right? These are really, priority 1 is super must be in the game. You don't have a game unless you have this. Okay, melee attacks, you bet, priority 1. You have to have melee attacks in our game. Ranged, AoE. Is it going to be ready for alpha? So alpha is, that's in this case, we're using it very loosely in this term, but alpha is just in that we used as just like you would for traditional development. We have, you get to an alpha, usually means you're feature complete or just about complete, but maybe your content isn't quite done. Not everything looks pretty. Beta is content and feature complete, meaning everything looks good, polished, maybe not all the way polished, but definitely your features are all in, and now you're just bug fixing, getting it ready to ship out the door. So anyway, this alpha column is just what it says. Is this a needed thing for alpha? X means yes. So we have priority, and this can mean alpha phase, and then of course the total man months, stuff like that. So why am I showing you that? Because over here, now we can say, hey, Matt, Justin, Tim, this is how long it's going to take us to get to alpha. If we wanted to do just P1s, like just the core games, like the core gameplay, it's going to take us this long. If we wanted to do P1s and P2s, meaning P2s are the nice to haves, it's going to take us as long. And P3s are like, boy, these are like super nice to haves, or they might be cut, but this would be like a much more full version of the game. This is how long it would take. This is just another way to look at the data to say, hey, studio leadership, it's going to take us this long and this many people to do this game. Is that cool? Yes, no, let's have a talk about it, let's figure it out. And again, you can click this button, it'll update, while the team goes in here and updates stuff, or Jeff comes over here and he's like, all right, I got to do a bunch of modeling for, the base heroes. Well, those are really important, right? This priority 3 means probably don't need it, but it'd be super dope to have. So these are things we realized, we don't need it. Maybe we said we don't need it. Maybe the budget said, can't have it, man, sorry. Because if you do, over here on the summary page, everything in this game, all the P1s, P2s, and P3s, is going to take this long. And you don't have, this many months of programming time, or this calendar months. You don't have 11.4 months of design. All that stuff. Like, again, these are just estimates. They're very informed and very intelligent estimates, but they're just that. These are just, you use all these tools, you look at all these things in different ways so that you can say, how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take?
Yeah, so as a producer, what do you think are some of the most valuable things you've learned in terms of keeping the project moving forward and dealing with problems that pop up?
Don't make decisions without all the data you can possibly get. You're going to hear a lot of opinions about your game. And many things in a game are subjective. Again, that's why I like programming so much. It's pretty black and white. Like, you either solved it or you didn't. It's awesome, but that's not the case. So it's tough, and this is probably more for someone like Brad. But it's like, stick to your guns. If a lot of people disagree with you about something, or if you're unsure about something and you're just like kind of freaking out about it, make sure that bring a fresh set of eyes in, who's knowledgeable about the situation, who's kind of close to the situation, or who you can show like the problem fully and be like, what do you think? Having stuff like that is having resources like that, whether it's a person or book, whatever, interviews, Kama Sutra article, whatever. It's really important. So definitely don't have knee-jerk reactions. Stick to your guns. Don't let the opinions, even if it's 100,000 opinions, don't let them affect yours if you really, really think it's right. Another thing that I found, this is back when I was a backbone, is don't get too caught up in hyper-detailed estimates. You are doing a really controlled chaos experiment with making games, especially if you're lucky, like Double Fine is, to have the chance of not having a lot of external factors that influence your ship date or when you have to get this out the door. We have the awesome opportunity to iterate. I've seen a lot of younger people or newer people to management, or people who like me who are tasked with tracking this kind of stuff. Like, you are the person who should know, the details, but don't get too caught up in those hyper small details. Don't try and task everything out ahead of time. It's all about reacting and acting and knowing when to do which. And trust that your guys will get it done. And if they're not, have a conversation with it. But don't try and ask people to do things that are like so detailed, like the estimates. Don't ask people to do that. They're not going to be able to do that. No one can. The most veteran person can't. So just constantly roll with it and react. And you can always say, like, that's why I think prioritizing stuff is great. You can't tell me how much work you can get done in 3 months, unless you're really doing the same thing over and over again. But what I can do for you is I can ask you to prioritize what you feel are the most important things, and we can break those down and try and time bucket a lot of that stuff for you. And we can always be there to remind you, like, hey, you're coming up on, how much time you said you wanted for this P1 thing, and let's talk again, let's reevaluate, let's go through this process again. Always talk, always talk, I guess, but you also want to get out of people's way. But I guess to start that over is sort of like, don't try and estimate things into too fine detail. That's bad. Like taking this nebulous idea, especially from like someone like, someone like a designer who's like trying to figure this stuff out, and like when you can come and like work through and like, help just slowly coalesce this stuff into something that can be, for the most part, put on a schedule, put on a timeline. Like, it's really cool. It's because if you don't do that, if no one does that, nothing will ever come to completion, and people will work off in different directions. There'll be no cohesion. That's why I say don't get too caught up in those details, because like if you're really just intelligently driving this thing and making these estimates more and more accurate, controlling this chaos more and more, like, it is really cool to see a game can ship from just an idea, and you can help a group of people, of any 10 people, 30 people, 100 people, to like just all work together to get it done. It's pretty insane. It's one of the hardest jobs, I think, no matter what the name of it is, to get other people to do what needs to be done, and get it done in a meaningful, within a time frame, is one of the hardest things you can do in any job. Because people forget, people have stuff to do, they got personal stuff, whatever. So it's really cool.